Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a horror film, Satan's Slave. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. One night, a woman is chanting a prayer while crying. It seems that she is warding off something evil. After that night, we see a woman named Rinny visiting a music company. It is revealed that her mother was a singer and Rinny came to the company to get her mother's sales and royalties. However, an agent informs her that her mother's sales didn't produce income. Rinny explains that her family is under financial hardships because her mother is sick. However, the agent feels bad for Rinny and hands her a small amount of money so that they can get by. Shortly after, Rinny is on her way home and she's seen living near the outskirts of the city with her family. When Rinny arrives at her home, she greets her grandmother, her mute little brother Ian, and her other little brother Bondi. After that, she heads to her father to inform him that she did not get money from the music company. She argues with her father and suggests selling the house instead. However, her father rejects selling it because it won't be easy. Their argument is cut short when her mother calls for help using a bell. Rinny heads over there to her mother's room, and we see that her mother can't move and speak properly. Rinny asks her mother if she needs anything. Her mother rings the bell and freaks out while looking at the ceiling. Rinny sees nothing at the ceiling, so she confiscates the bell. Shortly after, her mother calms down. Later that evening, the father plays his wife's songs, and he relaxes outside with his mother. Shortly after, Rinny's other brother Tony arrives on a motorcycle. Tony greets his father and gives him the key to his motorcycle to sell for his mother's medicine. The father then sells the motorcycle to their neighbor, who is waiting at their house. After that, Tony goes inside to greet his other siblings. Tony offers them an expensive dinner because he recently sold his stuff. Suddenly, the mother's bell starts ringing, so Tony heads over to his mother to begin her bedtime routine. In the mother's room, Tony greets his mother and combs her hair. Then he notices that her hair has fallen off. Tony promises to work hard for her medication. Suddenly, the windows burst open and scare Tony. He checks the window to see if something's outside, but he sees nothing there. When he looks back at his mother, he sees her creepily staring at him. This unsettles him, so he leaves. At bedtime, Rinny sees her father in her mother's room. There, he begs his wife to take pity on the kids. Rinny asks what it means, but her father just tells her to go to sleep. Later that night, Rinny wakes up to noises upstairs. She follows the noises and it leads to her mother's room. There she sees her mother standing near the window, and then her mother approaches her. Suddenly, her real mother in bed aggressively rings the bell to warn her. Rinny realizes the one standing up is an imposter. Then the imposter turns around and smiles at her mother. Rinny wakes up and realizes that it's only a nightmare. She heads back up to her mother's room to check on her. When she gets to her mother's room, she sees her mother standing near the window, just like in the dream. She approaches her mother and asks if she is okay. Just then, her mother turns around and collapses with a shocked expression. Rinny calls for help, and her father and brothers arrive, only to see that their mother is already dead. The next day, Rinny's family mourns at the mother's funeral. The priest offers the funeral rites and concludes the ceremony. The priest's son introduces himself to Rinny. However, Rinny dismisses him, and she goes to Bondi, who suddenly stops walking. Bondi tells Rinny that their mother will haunt them when they walk away from her grave. Rinny assures him that it's not true and convinces him to come home. Later that evening, the father tucks the kids in bed and goes to the living room. There he tells Rinny and Tony that he is going to town to settle a financial dispute with a bank to save their house. Tony and Rinny think this is inappropriate, considering the recent funeral, but the father insists or else they will become homeless. Then they all go to sleep except for Tony, who is listening to his mother's song on the radio. Suddenly, Tony hears noises in his mother's bedroom. There, he sees a floating object that suddenly falls. He runs back to his room, thinking it's an illusion, and he goes to sleep. The following day, the father goes into town, leaving Tony and Rinny in charge of taking care of the house. Bondi says that he will skip school because he will be bullied. So Tony tries to convince him to go to school and gives him a toy camera as a bribe. However, Tony leaves as he is late for work. Just then, Rinny notices that the plumbing is not working, so she goes to the well to get water. The following moment, Rinny senses ghosts in the mirror beside her, but when she looks in the mirror, the ghosts disappear. Meanwhile, Bondi plays with his toy camera, and he sees it filled with pictures of their house. Then, a ghostly form of his mother appears in the camera, so Bondi throws it away in shock. He tries browsing again, but this time the camera goes back to normal. Later that night, Tony listens again to his mother's songs on the radio. However, this time it broadcasts his mother's voice as if she's speaking to Tony. Suddenly, a ghost of his mother appears beside him, so he rushes to turn on the lights and the ghost vanishes. At that time, Ian asks Bondi to accompany him to the bathroom, but Bondi is asleep, so Ian goes to the bathroom alone. Meanwhile, in the room with the well, a figure approaches Ian from behind. Luckily, it was only Bondi who woke up to accompany him. After that, they both head back to their room. However, Ian is scared as he sees his mother in the hallway. However, Bondi doesn't see it and tries throwing a blanket where Ian sees their mother. Just then, the blanket lands on an invisible person, and then it chases after them. Rinny hears their scream, and she quickly goes to them. Then the children tell Rinny that they saw a ghost. However, Rinny dismisses it and tells them that it's only their nightmare. Meanwhile, the grandmother is writing a letter while looking distressed. The following day, Rinny heads to the cemetery with the priest's son. As they walk together, the priest's son tells her that he saw ghostly forms of Rinny's mother during the funeral and at their house. He explains to Rinny that the forms are not her mother, but something evil. The priest's son offers to protect them at his home while waiting for their father back. However, it seems that Rinny doesn't believe in his superstitions and doubts his warning, so she refuses his offer and heads home. Meanwhile, the grandmother is seen running away from something. However, the grandmother stops and stands up as if something has caught her. Shortly after, Rinny gets home and Bondi helps her to look for their grandmother. To their shock, they find their grandmother's lifeless body inside the well. The following day at the grandmother's funeral, the priest's son believes that something is targeting Rinny's family, so he plans to convince Rinny to accept his protection before it's too late. Back at Rinny's home, we see Rinny finding her grandmother's letter in her room and an address indicated in the letter. The following moment, Rinny goes to the address with the help of the priest's son, and she meets an old man who is a childhood friend of her grandmother. The old man tells her that the grandmother did not approve Rinny's parents' marriage, and the grandmother also thought that Rinny's mother was infertile for years, until suddenly she gave birth to Rinny and the other children. Rinny asks him why he is telling this to her, so the old man explains that after giving birth, Rinny's mother became ill, which made her grandmother doubt her fertility was coming from God. Rinny doubts his story, so the old man gives her a book with an article to help her understand. Meanwhile, back at home, Bondi starts acting weird when he hears whispers in his sleep. The whispers tell him to kill Ian as he is dangerous, and he starts thinking of killing Ian ever since. At bedtime, Ian wakes up and goes to a spot where he used to play with his grandmother. There, Ian sees a shadow figure, which makes him run away. However, he gets stuck. Fortunately, the figure from the door didn't chase him. The next day, Rinny prepares breakfast for the family. She plays her mother's song, but it only plays in an ancient sinister language. She ignores this and proceeds to wake up Bondi and Ian. In their room, she notices that Ian is missing. After looking around the house, she finds him outside the house in a box asleep. She wakes him up and takes him in to comfort him from his nightmare. After that, Tony confronts Rinny about the book she got from the old man. He tells her that based on this article, their mother wasn't pregnant from their father, but instead, she was impregnated by different members of a satanic cult. He also confirms this to be true since all of their siblings look distinctly different. He adds that in his childhood, he accompanied their mother to her events as a singer. There, strange individuals visited his mother during the events to watch over her. He further explains that the cult allows infertile women to bear children through the worship of Satan. However, they can only bear children on the condition that they give their last child to the cult at the age of 7. And then this child becomes Satan's slave, which will represent the cult. Tony continues to explain that the last child should be given up, or else all its family members will be killed, and the child will be forcefully taken by the undead. This part makes Tony doubt the article, but he believes it since it's happening to them. However, Rinny doesn't believe it at all. After their discussion, the grandmother's wheelchair appears in the dining room and worries Rinny. Shortly after, Rinny asks the priest for assistance, and the priest advises them to pray regularly to God. The following night, Rinny prays as the priest advises. However, the ghost of her mother haunts her during the prayer. This scares her, so she takes the family to the priest's house for protection. The following day, the priest's son gets a call from the old man telling him to meet. So he meets the old man, and the old man gives him a letter for Rinny. The priest's son rushes to go to Rinny, but along the road he gets into an accident with a truck, and he dies. Fortunately, Rinny finds the letter when the priest's son's body is brought back to the priest. After the priest's son's funeral, Rinny notices a figure resembling the priest's son, and she gets pulled by it to the window. Luckily, her siblings manage to pull her back in. Then they meet their father and return home safely. At their home, they inform their father of the recent happenings, and the father decides to leave the house for good. Later that night, Ian asks Tony again to accompany him to the bathroom. Suddenly, Ian gets locked inside the room. His father tries to save him as Ian gets dragged into the well. Fortunately, the father manages to get Ian just before the figure inside the well drags him in. During that incident, members of the satanic cult begin to surround their house. Meanwhile, Rennie, her father, and Tony get trapped in a room as the grandmother's wheelchair flies at them. Then the figure in the well tries to drag Ian back in again. Bondi thinks of giving up his brother. However, he decides to save Ian instead. The others manage to escape from the room and drive away the satanic cult. When the cultists leave, they drop a bunch of beans. The following day, the family prepares to leave their home. As they wait for the moving truck, Rennie discovers the beans and wonders what their purpose is. She remembers the letter the priest's son got from the old man, and she goes back to read it. The priest also stays with them before they move out. However, after waiting for a while, the truck fails to come to their house. Then, a blackout happens as the night falls, so the priest stays the night with the family to protect them. Meanwhile, Rennie finds the letter and reads the article given by the old man. She explains to Tony that the last child isn't a sacrifice, but a child of Satan, meaning Ian might be the child of Satan. It's revealed that in order to avoid her last child being taken by Satan, Rennie's mother tricked the cult into making her pregnant again and again before her every child reached the age of 7. Unfortunately, Satan discovered her trick and so cursed her with sickness. What's more, Rennie thinks that the figure in the well is their grandmother, trying to drag Ian to kill him and prevent his ascension as Satan's child and thus protect the family. She also realizes that the cultists dropped the beans so as to lead the undead to Satan's child. Suddenly, they're attacked once more when the father sees his wife's corpse. Meanwhile, Ian starts acting strangely in their bedroom, and he starts chanting an ancient language. The siblings also see the undead invading the house. The undead kill the priest, while Ian goes to his mother's undead corpse that appeared in the backyard. The father tries to get Ian back, but Tony stops him. The family eventually gives up on Ian as the undead take him as Satan's child. Suddenly, the old man arrives and rescues them in his truck, and they escape from the house. A year later, the family settles in their new life in an apartment. There, they meet a neighbor who offers them food, and as the neighbor returns to her apartment room, she's revealed to be a member of the cult as her apartment is filled with her supply of beans. Then the neighbor's lover urges to keep the family trapped in the apartment complex, foreshadowing the grim events Rennie's family will encounter. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.